The galactic community had watched humanity for 200 years, and in all that time, they had never understood them. Every other species in the known universe had risen to power through conquest. The Vraxi had burned their way across 3 sectors. The Karathi had enslaved dozens of worlds. The Melvari had built an empire on the bones of their enemies. This was the natural order of things. The strong took what they wanted, and the weak either submitted or died. But humans were different. They had emerged from their small blue world with technology that was impressive enough, with ships that could match most other species in speed and capability. Yet, instead of using their power to conquer, they had done something that puzzled everyone. They had asked to talk. Ambassador Catherine Moore had spent 15 years representing humanity on the Galactic Council. She was a small woman with gray hair and kind eyes, and she had heard every insult that alien tongues could craft. Today was no different. She sat in her designated seat in the great chamber on Nexus Prime, surrounded by delegates from 40 different species. And she listened as Ambassador Zethkar of the Vraxi Dominion spoke. The humans wished to discuss trade routes, Zethkar said, his forearms spreading wide in a gesture of mockery. His species looked something like giant insects, with hard shells and mandibles that clicked when they were amused. Right now, they were clicking a great deal. Always trade routes, always negotiations, always talking. Tell me, Ambassador Moore, does your species even know how to fight? Or did evolution forget to give you claws? The chamber filled with laughter. Catherine had heard this joke before, or versions of it. She smiled politely and waited for the noise to die down. We know how to fight, Ambassador, she said calmly. We simply prefer not to. War is expensive. It wastes lives and resources that could be better used elsewhere. We believe that most conflicts can be resolved through patience and understanding. More laughter. Zethkar leaned forward, his compound eyes glittering with contempt. Patience and understanding. How touching. And what happens when patience fails? What happens when someone simply takes what they want from you? That has not happened yet, Catherine replied. We remain hopeful that it never will. She knew, even as she spoke, that her hope was fading. The Vraxi had been growing bolder. Their ships had been entering human space without permission. They had seized merchant vessels on false charges. They had arrested human citizens and thrown them into detention facilities for imaginary crimes. Each time, humanity had protested through diplomatic channels. Each time, the Vraxi had ignored them. On Earth, Admiral Benjamin Cole was reading the latest intelligence reports in his office at Fleet Command. He was 62 years old, with a face that looked like it had been carved from stone and eyes that had seen too much. He had served in the military for 40 years, and in all that time, he had never fired a shot in anger. No human admiral had. The fleet existed to protect shipping lanes and respond to emergencies, not to wage war. But Cole knew something that the rest of the galaxy did not. He knew about the other fleet. Captain Lisa Bennett stood across from him, waiting for orders. She was young for her rank, barely 40, but she had proven herself the best tactical mind of her generation. In the war games and simulations that humanity conducted in secret, she had never lost. 17 ships seized in the past year, Cole said, setting down his tablet. 243 citizens held prisoner. The Vraxi are testing us, pushing to see how far they can go before we push back. And the Council does nothing, Lisa said. There was frustration in her voice. She had wanted to act months ago. The Council is dominated by species who think like the Vraxi. They see our restraint as weakness. They think we are afraid to fight because we cannot fight. Cole stood and walked to the window. Outside, the lights of the Luna shipyards glittered against the darkness of space. From this angle, they looked like any other industrial facility. Only a handful of people knew what was really being built there. "Sir," Lisa said carefully, "how much longer can we wait? They are growing bolder every month. Eventually, they will do something that we cannot ignore." Cole nodded slowly. He'd been thinking the same thing. "Do you know why humans avoid war, Captain? The real reason? Because we value life. Because we believe in peaceful solutions. Those are reasons, yes, but not the only ones." Cole turned to face her. "We avoid war because we remember what we are. We remember the trenches of the First World War, the firebombing of Dresden, the atomic destruction of Hiroshima, the biological attacks of the Third World War. For 10,000 years, humans have been perfecting the art of killing each other. We have more experience with violence than any species in this galaxy. We have built weapons that can crack planets and designed diseases that can end civilizations. We know exactly what we are capable of when we stop holding back." Lisa was silent for a moment. She had studied human history, of course. Every officer did. But hearing it spoken aloud like this made it feel different. "More real. We avoid war because we are afraid," Cole continued. "Not afraid of our enemies. Afraid of ourselves. Afraid of what we might become if we let the beast off its chain. So we talk. We negotiate. We make concessions that other species see as weakness. Because the alternative is to show the galaxy what humanity looks like when it goes to war. And once we do that, there is no going back." He picked up the tablet again and looked at the reports. 17 ships, 243 prisoners, countless insults and provocations. So far, humanity had absorbed them all. "Keep the fleet ready," he told Lisa. "Continue the exercises. And pray that the Vraxi are smart enough to stop before they cross a line that cannot be uncrossed." Lisa saluted and left. Cole remained at the window, looking out at the shipyards where humanity's true power lay hidden. Ships that had never flown in formation. Weapons that had never been fired. Soldiers who had trained for battles they hoped would never come. 200 years of peace. 200 years of being laughed at and dismissed and underestimated. Cole hoped it would continue. He hoped the Vraxi would grow tired of their games and find some other species to bully. But deep in his heart, he knew that hope was running out. The Vraxi would push too far eventually. They always did. And when that happened, the galaxy would learn the truth about humanity. They would learn why the quiet ones were the most dangerous of all. The colony of New Haven was not important. It was a small world at the edge of human space, with no valuable minerals and no strategic position. 40,000 people lived there, mostly farmers and their families who had wanted to build a simple life under an alien sun. They grew wheat and corn and vegetables in soil that their grandparents had made fertile through decades of hard work. They raised children who had never seen Earth except in pictures. They built schools and churches and community centers where neighbors gathered on weekends to share meals and stories. Commander Gregory Vance was the only military officer on the planet. He had 12 soldiers under his command and a single patrol ship that was older than most of his crew. His job was to respond to emergencies, help with natural disasters, and occasionally deal with disputes between farmers over water rights. He had never expected to fight a war. The Vraxi fleet arrived on a Tuesday morning local time. 12 warships dropped out of hyperspace without warning, their weapons already charging. Gregory was eating breakfast with his wife and 2 daughters when the alarm started screaming. He ran to the command center, still wearing his civilian clothes, and found chaos. His communications officer, a young woman named Patricia, was trying to make sense of the sensor readings. 12 contacts, Commander. Vraxi configuration. They are not responding to our hails. Gregory felt his stomach drop. 12 warships. Against his single patrol craft and a planetary defense grid that was designed to stop asteroids, not a military assault. He had no chance. None at all. "Get a message to Earth," he ordered. "Tell them what is happening. Tell them." The first missiles hit before he could finish the sentence. The orbital defense platforms vanished in balls of fire. The communications array lasted only a few seconds longer. Gregory managed to record a brief message and send it on a tight beam transmission before the relay stations were destroyed. "This is New Haven. We are under attack. Vraxi forces are landing troops. Civilian casualties are—" He paused as he watched the feeds from the city cameras. Vraxi soldiers were marching through the streets, firing at everything that moved. Men, women, children running for shelter. God, they are firing on civilians. They are firing on. The building shook as a missile struck nearby. The transmission cut off. The attack lasted 6 hours. The Vraxi were not there to conquer. They were not interested in occupying the planet or taking prisoners for labor. They had come to send a message. They wanted humanity to know what happened to species that were too weak to defend themselves. When the Vraxi fleet finally withdrew, New Haven was a graveyard. The cities had been reduced to rubble. The farms were burning. Of the 40,000 people who had lived there that morning, fewer than 2,000 remained alive, most of them hiding in the underground mining tunnels that had been too deep for the Vraxi weapons to reach. Gregory Vance was not among the survivors. He had died defending the entrance to a shelter where 300 children had been hiding. The Vraxi had found him with an empty rifle in his hands and 17 dead enemies at his feet. He had bought the children enough time to seal the blast doors. On Earth, the news arrived 12 hours later. The message that Gregory had sent was fragmented and full of static, but the meaning was clear. The images from the rescue ships that arrived the next day were worse. Bodies in the streets. Homes reduced to ash. Toys scattered among the ruins. President Daniel Foster watched the footage in silence. He was a calm man by nature, a former professor who had entered politics late in life because he believed in public service. He had never raised his voice in anger. He had never wished harm on another living being. But as he watched the images from New Haven, something changed in his eyes. Something cold and hard and ancient. His advisors had gathered in the Situation Room, waiting for instructions. They expected him to call for an emergency session of the Galactic Council. They expected diplomatic protests and economic sanctions and all the other tools that humanity had used for 2 centuries. Instead, he stood up and walked to the window. He stood there for a long time, looking out at the lights of the city below. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. "How many children?" His chief of staff, a woman named Margaret Palmer, checked her tablet. Approximately 8,000 miners were residents of New Haven. Current confirmed. Survivors number 412. The rest are presumed dead. Daniel closed his eyes. 8,000 children. 7,500 of them were gone, murdered by creatures who had decided that human lives were worthless. That human suffering was amusing. That human restraint was weakness to be exploited. "Prepare a statement," he said. "I will address the nation and the colonies within the hour." He walked to the door and paused. "And contact Admiral Cole. Tell him it is time." 3 hours later, Daniel Foster stood before the cameras. Billions of humans across dozens of worlds watched as their president spoke. For 200 years, humanity has sought peace among the stars. We have extended our hand in friendship to every species we have encountered. We have absorbed insults, endured provocations, and made concession after concession in the name of avoiding bloodshed. We did this not because we were weak, but because we believed that civilization meant choosing dialogue over destruction. He paused, and the cold fury in his eyes was visible to everyone watching. Yesterday, the Vraxi Dominion attacked our colony of New Haven. They killed 38,000 innocent people. Men, women, children. Farmers who wanted only to work their land and raise their families in peace. The Vraxi did this not because we threatened them, not because we provoked them. They did this because they believed we would do nothing. They believed our patience was cowardice. They believed our restraint was fear. His voice hardened. They were wrong. To the Vraxi Dominion, I say this. You have awakened something you do not understand. You have pushed us past a line we hoped we would never have to cross. And now you will learn why humanity has always avoided war. Not because we could not fight, but because we knew what would happen when we did. Across human space, the hidden shipyards began to open. The quiet fleet started its engines for the first time, and humanity prepared to show the galaxy what it really was. The Vraxi High Command received word of the human fleet 3 days after it crossed into their territory. Intelligence Officer Kethril presented his report to the assembled admirals with confidence. Approximately 50 vessels, he said. Mostly patrol craft and light cruisers. They are moving toward our outpost at Kethmara. At their current speed, they will arrive in 18 hours. Admiral Von Axe clicked his mandibles with amusement. He was the supreme commander of the Vraxi military, a veteran of 30 years of conquest. He had crushed 17 species and added their worlds to the Dominion. The thought of fighting humans, the peaceful humans who had never won a real war, was almost insulting. 50 ships, he said. Send 40 to meet them. That should be more than enough to teach these soft creatures that they should have stayed in their corner of the galaxy. The Vraxi fleet departed within hours. Commander Greshtar led the force personally. He was young and ambitious, eager to add a victory against the humans to his record. As his ships approached Kethmara, he ordered his communications officer to broadcast a message to the incoming human fleet. Attention, human vessels. You are entering Vraxi territory in violation of galactic law. Surrender immediately, and we may show mercy. Resist, and you will be destroyed. You have 1 hour to comply. The response came exactly 60 seconds later. It was a simple audio message, no video, spoken by a female voice that sounded almost bored. Vraxi Fleet, this is Captain Lisa Bennett of the Human Defense Force. Your demand is rejected. You have committed an act of war against the human species. You have murdered innocent civilians. You have forfeited any right to mercy. Prepare to defend yourselves. Greshtar laughed. The humans were brave. He would give them that. Foolish, but brave. He ordered his fleet into standard battle formation and waited for the enemy to appear on his sensors. What appeared was not what he expected. The first human ships emerged from hyperspace in perfect coordination. Not 50 vessels, as intelligence had reported, but 200. Carriers, battleships, destroyers, and cruisers in configurations that the Vraxi database had never recorded. Ships that moved with a precision that seemed almost mechanical, each one exactly where it needed to be. Each one already targeting a specific enemy vessel. What? Greshtar stared at his tactical display. Where did they come from? Our intelligence said. Commander, his sensor officer interrupted, his voice trembling. I am reading weapon signatures unlike anything in our database. Their ships are... Commander, their power output is 3 times what our vessels can produce. Lisa Bennett sat in the command chair of the destroyer Vigilance and watched the Vraxi fleet scramble to react. They were good, she admitted. Well-trained and experienced. But they had never faced an enemy like humanity. They had never fought against a species that had spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of war. All ships, she said calmly, execute pattern Omega-7. Target enemy weapon systems first, then engines. We want them disabled, not destroyed. Not yet. The human fleet moved as one. It was not the chaotic brawl that most space battles became, with each ship fighting independently. This was something else, something choreographed. Every maneuver had been practiced 1,000 times in simulations. Every captain knew exactly what every other captain would do. They flowed around the Vraxi formation like water around stones, striking from angles that should have been impossible to coordinate. The Vraxi fought back. They were warriors, after all, and they did not know how to surrender. But their weapons seemed to pass through human shields without effect. Their missiles were intercepted before they could reach their targets. Their formations were broken apart by precise strikes that killed officers and severed communication lines. In 47 minutes, it was over. 40 Vraxi warships drifted dead in space, their weapons silenced, their engines cold. Not a single human vessel had been lost. Not a single human soldier had died. Greshtar sat in his command chair, surrounded by the bodies of his bridge crew, and watched as human boarding parties cut through his hull. He had never imagined this. He had never dreamed that any species could fight like this. The humans had not just defeated his fleet. They had dismantled it with the cold efficiency of surgeons removing a tumor. Admiral Cole arrived at Kethmara 6 hours later, aboard the carrier Perseverance. He surveyed the wreckage with no satisfaction. This was not a victory to celebrate. It was a beginning. Broadcast to all Vraxi forces in this sector, he ordered. Tell them what happened here. Tell them that this is their only warning. Every system they have taken, every world they have conquered, every crime they have committed, they will answer for all of it. They can surrender now and face justice, or they can fight and face destruction. The choice is theirs. The message spread across Vraxi space within hours. At first, the High Command did not believe it. They demanded confirmation. They sent scouts who did not return. They reviewed the sensor data again and again, certain that there must be some mistake. There was no mistake. On the Galactic Council, the other species watched in stunned silence. The Karathi ambassador requested an emergency session. The Melveri withdrew their diplomatic staff from human space. Everyone who had ever laughed at humanity's reluctance to fight was suddenly very quiet. Ambassador Catherine Moore received 100 messages in a single day. Former enemies wanted to assure her that they had always respected humanity, that they had never truly believed the humans were weak, that their past comments had been misunderstood. She did not respond to any of them. Cole pushed his fleet deeper into Vraxi territory. Every outpost fell. Every defensive line crumbled. The Vraxi threw everything they had at the human advance, and nothing worked. The humans adapted to every tactic, countered every strategy, exploited every weakness. How? Admiral Von Axe demanded at an emergency council of war. How are they doing this? They have never fought a real war. They have no experience. One of his younger officers spoke up hesitantly. Sir, they have experience. They have 10,000 years of it. They just never used it against anyone except themselves. Von Axe stared at the officer, and for the first time in his long career of conquest, he felt something he had never felt before: fear. The war lasted 8 months. Historians would later struggle to find words to describe it. The Vraxi Dominion had ruled 400 worlds. They had the largest military in their sector of the galaxy. They had conquered species that were older and more advanced than humanity. None of it mattered. Human forces moved through Vraxi space like a storm that could not be stopped. Admiral Cole coordinated the naval campaign with a precision that bordered on supernatural. Every battle was won before it started. Every fortress fell faster than anyone predicted. The Vraxi fought with everything they had, with courage and desperation, and finally with terror. And none of it made any difference. But it was not just the space battles that broke the Vraxi. It was what happened on the ground. General Patricia Simmons commanded the invasion of Vraxi Prime itself. She was 53 years old, a small woman with short gray hair and eyes that had seen too much death and simulation to be surprised by the real thing. She had studied every war in human history. She knew what worked and what did not. And she knew something that the Vraxi had never learned. The most effective weapon was not always the biggest one. The Vraxi had prepared for a direct assault. They had built fortifications around their capital city that could withstand orbital bombardment. They had dug tunnels and bunkers and defensive positions that they believed would hold for years. They were ready to make the humans pay for every meter of ground in blood. But Patricia did not give them the chance. "We are not going to attack their defenses," she told her officers at the planning session. "We are going to make their defenses irrelevant." Instead of landing troops in front of the Vraxi lines, she dropped them behind. Small teams of special forces soldiers, trained for exactly this kind of mission, appeared in places the Vraxi thought were safe. They destroyed supply depots. They cut communication lines. They assassinated commanders and disappeared before anyone could respond. At the same time, Patricia began broadcasting messages to the Vraxi civilian population. Not threats, not demands, just simple statements of fact. Your military attacked a peaceful colony. They killed 40,000 innocent people, including 8,000 children. We did not want this war. We came to bring those responsible to justice, not to harm you. If you do not fight, you will not be harmed. If you surrender, you will be treated fairly. We are not your enemies. Your leaders are. It was a kind of warfare the Vraxi had never encountered. They were used to enemies who met them strength against strength. They did not know how to fight an enemy that whispered doubt into the ears of their people, that turned their own soldiers against them with promises of mercy, that seemed to know every weakness before it was exploited. Within 3 weeks, the Vraxi planetary defense network began to collapse from the inside. Units that had been ready to fight to the death started surrendering. Officers who had sworn loyalty to the Dominion quietly opened gates and lowered shields. The great fortifications that were supposed to hold for years fell without a single shot being fired. Admiral Cole brought the Perseverance into orbit above the Vraxi capital on a quiet morning. Below him, the planet that had ruled an empire lay broken and helpless. The enemy fleet was gone, destroyed, or surrendered. The planetary defenses were silent. The war was over. Ambassador Catherine Moore stood beside him on the bridge. She had insisted on being there for this moment. "The Galactic Council is sending messages every hour," she said. "They are demanding that we stop. They say we have made our point. They say we are being too harsh." Cole almost laughed. Too harsh. They watched the Vraxi murder civilians for centuries and said nothing. Now they want to lecture us about being too harsh. "They are afraid of us now," Catherine said quietly. "All of them. Every species in the galaxy is looking at what we have done, and they are terrified." Good. Cole stared at the planet below. He could give the order right now. He could launch enough firepower to turn Vraxi Prime into a dead rock. Every ship in his fleet would obey without question. After New Haven, after 38,000 murdered innocents, no one would even blame him. He thought about Gregory Vance dying in front of a shelter full of children. He thought about the families who had been burned alive in their homes. He thought about every insult and every provocation and every time the galaxy had laughed at humanity for being too weak to fight back. The beast inside him wanted blood, wanted revenge, wanted to show the Vraxi what real destruction looked like. But he was not just a beast. He was human, and that meant he had a choice. "Contact the Vraxi High Council," he said finally. "Tell them we are prepared to accept their unconditional surrender. Their military leaders will stand trial for their crimes. Their empire will be dissolved, but their people will live. Their world will stand. Catherine looked at him with something like relief. Are you sure? After everything they did? We came here for justice, Cole said. Not genocide. If we destroy them completely, we become exactly what they thought we were. We become monsters. He turned away from the viewport. That is not who we want to be. That is not who we are. The surrender came 3 days later. The Vraxi High Council, those who had not already fled or been killed, agreed to every human demand. Their admirals and generals were arrested. Their fleet was dismantled. Their conquered worlds were given the chance to choose their own futures. General Simmons walked through the streets of the Vraxi capital on the day the war officially ended. The buildings were intact. The civilians were going about their lives, watched by human soldiers who had orders to help, not harm. It was not the scene of destruction that wars usually left behind. One of her aides, a young lieutenant named Andrew, walked beside her. Sir, I do not understand. We had them completely. We could have done anything we wanted. Why show mercy? Patricia stopped and looked at him. Because mercy is expensive, Lieutenant. It costs us nothing to destroy. It costs everything to restrain ourselves when we have the power to do whatever we want. That is what separates civilization from barbarism. Not strength, restraint. She looked up at the alien sky, so different from Earth's blue, and thought about all the wars she had studied. All the victories that had turned to ashes because the winners had not known when to stop. We won this war, she said. Now we have to win the peace. And that is much harder. The Treaty of New Haven was signed on the 1-year anniversary of the attack. Representatives from every species in the Galactic Council gathered to witness it. The Vraxi delegates sat in silence as their empire was formally dissolved, their military permanently disbanded, and their leaders handed over for trial. But the treaty also contained something else, something that confused the watching galaxy more than anything that had come before. Article 7. Catherine Moore read aloud to the assembled delegates. The Human Coalition agrees to provide reconstruction assistance to former Vraxi worlds, including medical aid, infrastructure development, and educational programs. This assistance will be offered without conditions or requirements of repayment. A murmur ran through the chamber. The Karathi ambassador rose to speak. This is irregular. The humans have won total victory. By all precedent and custom, they should be demanding tribute, territory, resources. Instead, they offer help. This makes no sense. Catherine smiled. It was the same smile she had worn through years of insults and mockery, but now it carried a different weight. It makes perfect sense, Ambassador. We did not fight this war to build an empire. We fought it to bring justice for our murdered people and to ensure that such a thing never happens again. Destroying the Vraxi would not accomplish either goal. Helping them become something better might. After the ceremony, Catherine met with former Ambassador Zethgar. He had been stripped of his title and was awaiting trial for his role in encouraging the attack on New Haven. He sat in a simple detention cell, his mandibles still and his compound eyes dull. I do not understand your species, he said. We killed your people. We laughed at your weakness. We thought you were prey to be devoured. And now that you have beaten us, now that you could do anything you want to us, you offer help. Why? Catherine sat down across from him. Do you know what happened on Earth about 400 years ago? There was a great war. 2 sides fought across the entire planet for 6 years. Millions died. Cities were destroyed. One side won completely, absolutely. They could have done anything they wanted to the losers. And what did they do? They helped rebuild. They sent food and medicine and money. They helped their former enemies create new governments and new economies. Within a generation, Those former enemies had become close allies. Within 2 generations, they were friends. Zethkar's mandibles clicked slowly. That is not how things work. The strong dominate the weak. This is the natural order. Maybe for some species, Catherine said. But humans learned something a long time ago. Permanent enemies are expensive. They drain resources and attention forever. But former enemies who become friends, they become your strongest supporters because they remember what you could have done and what you chose to do instead. She leaned forward. We did not want this war, Ambassador. We never wanted it. We gave your people every opportunity to choose peace. You refused. And when you attacked our families, our children, our homes, yes, we showed you what we are capable of when pushed too far. But we are not monsters. We never were. Then what are you? Catherine thought about the question for a long moment. We are survivors, she said finally. We survived ice ages and plagues and famines. We survived our own worst impulses, our own capacity for destruction. We nearly wiped ourselves out a dozen times. But we are still here. And we learned, over thousands of years of bloody lessons, that the only way to truly win is to build something lasting. Something that benefits everyone, not just ourselves. She stood up to leave. You will face trial, Ambassador. The individuals responsible for New Haven will be held accountable. But your people will not be punished for the crimes of their leaders. That is not justice. That is just revenge wearing a different mask. 2 years later, Admiral Cole retired from active service. He had become the most famous human in the galaxy, the man who had led the fleet that conquered an empire in 8 months. Other species offered him honors and titles. He refused them all. His final address was broadcast across human space and beyond. Billions of beings, human and alien alike, watched as the old admiral spoke. People ask me why humanity avoids war. They used to think it was because we were weak, because we were naive, because we did not know how to fight. Now they know better. Now they have seen what we can do when we stop holding back. He paused, and his weathered face was grave. But knowing what we can do is not the same as understanding why we choose not to. So let me explain one final time for everyone who is watching. We avoid war because we remember. We remember the trenches where young men drowned in mud. We remember the cities that burned until nothing was left but ash. We remember the weapons that could end civilizations with the push of a button. We have lived through horrors that most species cannot imagine, and we inflicted those horrors on ourselves. We avoid war because we know the true cost. Not just the lives lost in battle, but the souls twisted by hatred. The children who grow up knowing only violence. The cycles of revenge that can last for generations. We have seen where that road leads, and we do not want to walk it again. And yes, we avoid war because we are afraid. Not afraid of our enemies. Afraid of ourselves. Afraid of the darkness that lives inside every human heart. We know how easy it is to let that darkness out. We know how hard it is to put it back. He looked directly into the camera, and every being watching felt as if he was speaking to them alone. The Vraxi thought our restraint was weakness. They learned otherwise. But I truly hope that the lesson they learned is not just about our strength. I hope they learned that restraint is strength. That choosing not to destroy when you have the power to destroy is the hardest choice there is. And that humanity makes that choice every single day, because we remember what happens when we do not. He straightened his uniform one final time. To everyone watching, we do not want to fight you. We will extend our hand in friendship to anyone who reaches back. We will trade and talk and negotiate and compromise until every other option is exhausted. But know this, if you push us too far, If you force us to unleash what we have spent centuries trying to contain, we will win. And you will wish, with every fiber of your being, that you had chosen peace instead." He saluted, and the broadcast ended. In the years that followed, the Galactic Council changed. Species that had built their empires on conquest began to reconsider. Trade agreements replaced territorial disputes. Diplomatic channels stayed open even during the worst disagreements. No one wanted to be the next to learn the lesson the Vraxi had learned. And sometimes, late at night, beings across the galaxy would look up at the stars and wonder about the strange species from the small blue world. The ones who had chosen peace for 200 years, not because they could not fight, but because they knew too well what fighting cost. The ones who had shown mercy to their defeated enemies instead of vengeance. The ones who had proven that the most dangerous creature in the universe was not the one who loved war, but the one who had learned to hate it. The quiet ones. The survivors. The humans. No one laughed at them anymore.